think your catchphrase is "the Bible says."
Yes.
They're always related to life. How do you keep in touch with what's happening and still maintain the really busy schedule that you have?
Well, I try to watch the news on the television and listen to it on the radio. I take several newspapers every day, and I have some associates that clip interesting stories out for me, and they give them to me. And then, of course, as you travel around the world, you meet so many interesting people who are filled with knowledge of what's happening in their part of the world, so that when people talk about Nicaragua, well, I've been to Nicaragua, and I've preached there and held a crusade in Nicaragua. Or if people talk about the Punjab, I've been to Chandigarh and the Punjab and spoken there. Or if they're talking about some other part of the world that's in the news, most of those places I've been to.
Right, so it's fairly easy for you to relate to what's happening in the news.
Yes.
Do you get up very early in the morning and sort of have a very disciplined day?
No. I think in some ways I'm a very undisciplined person. In comparison, let's say, to my wife. My wife is highly disciplined. I get up every morning about 6:30 or 7, have breakfast as soon.
That's early.
Did you count that early?
Yes.
You see, I was born and reared on a dairy farm, and we counted about 2:30 in the morning early. I usually had to get up at least by 3 o'clock, and I remember if I was not up by 3 one morning, my father took a bucket of cold water and threw it in my face. I got up quickly that morning. We had to get up to milk the cows.
So a day for you is very different, I suppose. Each day is different.
Well, it's according to where I am. If I'm at home, it's the same. I get up and have a period of devotion. I watch the news on the television. I have a bit of breakfast. My wife and I do together. Then we have prayer together. My wife and I pray and read the scriptures together. And that's when I do read my 5 Psalms and 1 chapter of Proverbs each day, is in the morning. And then I go to my work, which is always stacks of letters and phone calls backed up that I must return. Many of them I don't get to return because there are too many. And then in the afternoon, I try to save for a bit of recreation. I used to play a lot of golf. I've quit golf because it was taking too much time and became a little bit expensive. So I gave up golf about 8 years ago. But I used to play almost every day.
I've read a story about you, Billy, that your wife tells, about you worrying about little things. There was one trip she had to make, I think, from Florida back to North Carolina, and you said, well, there's going to be fog when you reach such a place. Then when you get to Atlanta, there's going to be a traffic jam. And you sound a bit like my wife, actually. You worry about things, don't you?
No, I don't think I'm a worrier. I think that's a little story my wife likes to tell. I've heard her tell it, because that was an exceptional incident in which we were kidding, mostly, because we were actually coming from Puerto Rico. And I was going to New York, and she was going to North Carolina. And I said, now, when you get to Atlanta, you have to change planes. And we live in an area where we have a lot of fog and a lot of thunderstorms and so forth. And I said, you may have to land in a thunderstorm and so forth. I think that was more or less it. But I don't say that I'm a worrier, but I do say that I have concerns constantly and burdens. And the distinction between worry and trust and burdens and concerns are not too easy to distinguish sometimes.
You do sound exactly like my wife, if I may say so. But faith is a funny thing in this way, isn't it? That some people will be concerned about the tiny matters, and yet they'll trust God to move a mountain.
Yes, I have a son-in-law who's a psychologist who could answer that better than I could, because you're getting into a psychological area in which we would have to delve into the human psychic to see what makes us tick, because different personalities have different characteristics. And I suppose there is a bit of an element in that, though I'm not sure that I have faith to move mountains. It's the big problems sometimes that I have the most concern over. I'm wrestling with one right now. As a matter of fact, 2 big problems. And I have to make decisions very shortly on both of them. And it's not easy to know what God would want me to do. And I'm waiting on the Lord to tell me. Now you say, how do I know the Lord's going to tell me?
Yes, I was going to say exactly that.
I think that He will impress upon me and give me a peace about it. And I think I'm developing a piece about a major decision that has to be made this week.
That's whether you go to Russia or not.
That's right. We've been invited to the Soviet Union by the Orthodox Church and the Baptist churches to go to 6 cities. And and the problem is I have no time. I'll have to push something out of the schedule and push things forward and do all kinds of things to the planning that had gone into this year in order to go for the month of September to the Soviet Union. And yet it is a tremendous opportunity, because we're going to have the opportunity of preaching in these great cathedrals, the gospel of Christ, with no restrictions, and then in some places in the open air to preach the gospel.
And possibly do anything. I know it's like a sort of drop in the ocean, but is there anything that the ordinary Christian sitting in church can do to better the situation in the world?
Yes, I think live for Christ himself. The world is longing to see a person who really lives. Like Gandhi said. He said, if I could see a Christian, I would believe. He said that, I believe, in South Africa when he was just thrown out of a Christian church. Gandhi could have been the greatest Christian leader of all time had the church been the church. But unfortunately, some of our churches are not the church.
Yes, and this is a very confusing situation for the man in the street.
It is indeed, and this is one of the things that I hope will come out of these meetings in the Northeast, that people will see that they can make their church the true church. I asked a clergyman in America some time ago. He had moved to a big church as the minister, and I said, how do you like your church? He said, I don't know. I've only been there a year, and I haven't found the church yet. What he meant was he hasn't found that little body of believers in every church that really believe. Now, there are some churches in this country that are packed out and people are turned away at the services. There are other churches that are in sharp decline and are being closed. For example, we just came from Bristol. There's a church right in the heart of town. You can't get a seat unless you get there early. At the same time, within sight of that church, they're closing 4 other churches because nobody's attending. Now, what makes the difference? The minister preaches the gospel. He preaches the Bible. He preaches in the language of the people. He's alive. All of them are Anglican churches.
Billy, I wish I had more time to go on. I could go on talking to you for hours and hours and hours. But before we close, I think there are thousands of Christians in Britain who would like me to say thank you for your ministry to us over the years, and every blessing for your continued work.
Thank you very much.
I hope the weather